was more nervous about walking up those stairs going, Lord, please don't let me fall. Please don't let me fall, than actually standing before you guys. But I wanted to take just a minute. First of all, I wanted to tell you that our sweet Miss Connie has made each lady here or young lady a sweet little gift out in the foyer. So just take a minute when you get ready to exit and grab you a prayer pocket. Connie has faithfully worked on those for months and months, sewing these prayer pockets for you guys. So grab you one up. But I did want to just take just a very short minute and talk about my mama for just a minute. A lot of you guys know that my mom went to be with the Lord this past year, and I've wondered, how is Mother's Day going to look? Like, am I going to be able to get through the service without crying? Probably not. But also, am I going to be able to celebrate my mom instead of just mourn and grieve for her? And so I was trying to put thoughts into words, and I wrote down a few things that I want y'all to know about my mama and why I celebrate her today. And I miss her, but it's not a sad mourning. It's a missing in hope of what's to come. I could tell you guys so many things about my mom. I could tell you the infinite ways that she showered her family with love. I could tell you stories of her story, and that story that was a beauty for ashes story, a redemption story. I could describe her prayer life. I could even tell you that she was a stinker every single day of her life, because she was. But the thing I want you guys to know about my mom is that my mom was a faithful follower of Jesus. She loved a faithful God. When I think about my mama, I think about her rising up early. She always had a song on her heart, a prayer often on her lips, and a Bible open on her lap. Every single day, I remember seeing her Bible open as she poured into God's Word. My mom became a believer when I was roughly the 5th grade. And when I tell you she became a believer, she was one of those kind of people that when Jesus changed her, he changed everything about her. Everything changed. For the next 40 years of her life, that's how long we had her with us. She was a faithful, dedicated follower of him. So when thinking about that, I was thinking, how did she stay so faithful to him in a world that offered so many distractions? She had 4 daughters. There were lots of distractions, and there was lots of busyness. And to be honest, there were lots of hardships. We had a lot that happened in our family life, and we were not wealthy. My dad worked hard, and it was not always the easiest of lives. So how did my mom remain so faithful to God through all of that? And I started thinking through it. I think that she stayed faithful to him because she regularly encountered him. And when she encountered him, she encountered his unchanging faithfulness to her, in her, and with her. My mama found it easy to be faithful to God because she knew he was a God who was faithful to keep his promises. And she knew that because she poured into his word, learning his promises, leaning on his promises, seeing his character throughout scripture. She found it easy to be faithful to God because he was so faithful to her. Morning by morning, new mercies she would see as he faithfully provided all that our family needed. He so richly cared for all of us, and she knew that because she knew him. She wasn't a person who was without concerns or fears of the future, but she knew who her confidence was in, and she knew he was faithful to provide. And finally, my mama found it easy to be a faithful follower because God was faithful to her all the days of her life. And it didn't stop there. She knew he was a faithful God of a promised future. She sang of that often in her worship. She sang all the time. She sang, "Redeeming love has been my theme and shall be till I die." She sang, "No guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry till final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. How beautiful heaven must be, sweet home of the happy and free, the fair haven of rest for the weary. How beautiful heaven must be." She sang victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. She knew that she could faithfully serve a faithful God who was and is and will always be faithful to his people. Now, my mama would have never wanted me to stand up in front of you guys and sing her praises. That would have made her so uncomfortable. But what she would want is for her life to direct us to His goodness, His glory, and His faithfulness. And that's why we're going to sing Great is Thy Faithfulness next.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Summer and winter, springtime and autumn, sun, moon, and stars, and their courses above, joined with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and the peace that endures. Thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
All right, I'll try to get through this. First of all, happy Mother's Day. I just have a cheat sheet. I don't have a poem or a letter like Christy. But I just, as you know, we have two kids, Alyssa and Nathan. Alyssa, she's here with us now. As you know, we've been through some hard things and some good things, but I'm here to say about my wife Ava, about her faith through all of this is kind of inspiring for all, especially for me. With her daughter, she had lost our first grandchild, which was pretty rough, but within time, we got a little miracle baby too. So the faithfulness that I've seen through my wife, through all of that, was just amazing. And we also have our son, which is, most of you know, is overseas doing mission work, which was super hard as parents. I ain't really talked about this stuff, but watching her faith through all that was inspiring too. Because most men don't talk about their feelings, and most men don't talk about their hardships and stuff like that. It was hard. It was especially hard on her, watching her son go to the other side of the world. But it was hard on me too. But her faith, seen her through it, and still going, and it's pretty hard every day. But she realizes that just if he can go halfway around the world and save one soul and give it to Jesus, it's worth it. It's worth not seeing him for 2 years to me. But her faith in God, I've really watched her grow over the last few years, reading her Bible more, last few years especially. It's been great. And I know my mom's not here, she's in Louisiana, but I did call her this morning. But one thing I can say is to all the mothers and grandmothers, most of you already know, and future moms, pray for your kids. Pray for the ones that stray away, because I know my mom did whenever I was out there in the wilderness, and I'm pretty sure that's what kind of brought me back. So happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there and future mothers.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well.
Happy Mother's Day. Corey, I don't even have a cheat sheet, so we'll see how this goes. I am very proud of my mother, and I've had a very blessed childhood. But I'm here to talk about my grandmother today. So I'm speaking for my larger family. Judy, my mom Janie, and Beth are sisters. Beth has a twin brother, Bill Grady. And their mother was Vernell Wilcox, and everyone knows her as Mama Nell. Mama Nell loved Jesus, and she made sure we were in church. If you've known us very long, you know that we usually move as a herd. So we went to church together for 30-something years at another church, and that's where Mama Nell went to church at Faith Baptist in Greenbrier. She loved to sing. When she was younger, she was part of a quartet, and they traveled across the state. They were even on the radio once. And she raised her kids to sing. She had her own quartet. So Mom and Judy and Bill and Beth used to sing together. And I was too young really to remember it, but she had cassette tapes of all of it. And she would sit and listen to the cassette tapes of them singing. So I have memories of what they sounded like, although I don't remember it actually happening. And, you know, I may have graduated 4 times and asked them to sing for me as a gift 4 times, and it's yet to happen, but Lord willing, maybe one day they will sing together again. Next time. There won't be a next time. I'm not doing it again. But Mama Nell would sit, and she had her tape player. I remember it vividly. We all do. And she would play those cassette tapes and sing. And so growing up, her tape player had a microphone attached. And so she would get all of us to sing, and she would record it. And we have Leanne singing The Lord's Army. I sang Lickery and Jesus, various other ones, but caught on a recording, and she was probably trying to get somebody to sing with her, because that's normally the only way we caught her voice. You know, you would hear her say, "Come on, Carrie, sing, Carrie," and then I was supposed to be performing. But when listening to some of her cassette tapes, we had this is what we do. We had her singing just a short little piece of What a Day That Will Be. And so, you know, Kyle throws it in there often. And if you're sitting near us, you know that the Kleenex are being passed because we can't get through it. But at her funeral, we played her own voice singing What a Day That Will Be. And Kyle has tried to play this song on a Mother's Day before, and I think we shut that down pretty quick. So this is going to be emotional for our family, and it always is. We're a bunch of ball bags anyway, so it doesn't take just a whole lot to get us going, but we can hear Mama Nell's voice singing this song, so this is the song we want played for her.
Good job, Addison. Very good. And thank you, all of you who were willing to share today. I appreciate you opening your lives up to be vessels unto honor, sanctified and fit for the Master's use. And I know there are many others that you would have done the same thing, and many of you submitted various songs of worship that relate to your mothers, and I apologize that we couldn't work them all in, but I'm grateful for that expression of a mother's faith from all of you who submitted those things. Today I want you to open up to 1 Samuel. Now, if you've got the little outline thing, it probably has the wrong text on it. It may. We're in 1 Samuel today. We're departing from our series in Psalms. For Mother's Day, we're going to look at 1 Samuel. We're going to be in chapter 1, but honestly, the material we'll cover will be chapter 2 as well. I'm just not going to read it today. So you'll just take my word for the things I tell you are in there. You can double check if you want to. 1 Samuel chapter 1. In just a moment, we're going to begin reading with verse 9. You know, the entire focus of our worship service is really faith, the faith of mothers, how God imparts faith to mothers, how the faith of a mother can impact our lives. There's no doubt, many of you can attest to this, and history has proven that the faith of a mother has been very influential on many, many people. In fact, Abraham Lincoln once said, "All that I am and hope to be, I owe to my angel mother. Her faith is that has impacted and shaped me." So we understand that today, that often it's the faith of a mother that can be so powerful in the lives of their children, of their family members, of those around them. This morning, I want us to look at the faith of one lady who was a mother and how her faith impacted not only her direct son, but the kingdom of God as a whole. She is an example of faith and what faith leads to when you have a dedicated and committed faith in God. Someone you're familiar with, I'm sure. 1 Samuel chapter 1, beginning with verse 9. So Hannah arose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, "O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head." And it happened as she was continuing praying before the Lord that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, "How long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you." But Hannah answered and said, "No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now." Then Eli answered and said, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked him." And she said, "Let your maidservant find favor in your sight." So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. We'll stop right there. You're probably familiar with Hannah's story. Hannah was a pious and devout woman. Her husband Elkanah was a faithful man. He always went to the tabernacle for the various religious festivals and ceremonies. He went yearly for the sin sacrifices. He was very committed. He by all indication, was in and above in all that he did for the Lord and his commitment to the Lord. And his wife Hannah was a pious woman. By Mosaic law, she would not have been required to attend everything with him, but there she is at the tabernacle as well. She's attending. She's a pious woman of faith. She's a devout woman of faith, yet she's an afflicted woman of faith. You will remember that she had no son. She was barren. She had a rival in her own home. Her husband had another wife who had many children, and she made a point to afflict Hannah, and she was grieved and sorrowful. Yet we find in this text that she takes her grief and sorrow to the Lord. In her faithfulness and in her committedness, In her strong faith, she bears her soul before the Lord, petitions him to act, is confident that he will. He indeed does. She receives a son she names Samuel. You'll remember Samuel becomes a judge, a priest, and a prophet in Israel. In fact, Samuel probably is the one single person who kept Israel dedicated to God in a certain point of Israel's history, especially as King Saul comes onto the scene and starts steering the country the wrong way. Samuel is the one who stands in the gap for the nation. He is a devout man of God, powerful man of God, and does a stupendous work for the kingdom of God. Yet, when you look at Samuel's life, it begins with the faith of his mother who says, God, I give you my son fully and wholly in response to what you've done in my life. Today, we're going to look at the faith of this mother. Mark this date down, by the way, 5/14/23, the shortest sermon in Bono history. I shouldn't say history, the last 5 years. It's about a mother. I can't say anything nice about it. No, I'm just joking. Three things I want you to see in this text about Hannah's faith. What it leads to. Let's begin with simply this, a mother's faith. A mother's faith. Hannah is a woman who had placed her trust in God. She went to God, confident in God, seeking relief from her affliction. You'll note in verse 11 her statement, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant. Now, this isn't a what-if statement. It's not a can you do it, God. This is actually a statement of God, I know you can if you so desire. God, I trust you. I believe you. I'm confident in you, God, if it's part of your will for my life. This is a statement of faith. She is saying, God, I absolutely know you have the ability. I'm totally confident in you, God. If it be your will you do this in my life? If this fits your plan for me, this is my petition. I'm seeking relief. I'm seeking comfort in distress. God, I'm confident in you. This statement is a statement of faith. What we find here is this woman declaring absolute faith in God. Her faith is not in Eli, the priest. Her faith is not in the various Levites that ministered around the tabernacle. Her faith is not in her husband or anyone else. She declares faith in God. God, I trust you. That's what that statement is. It's a declaration of faith. This is a woman of faith. Now, she describes her state there in verses 15 and 16. She describes herself as a woman of sorrowful spirit who prayed out of the abundance of my complaint and grief. So she's a woman who has a grief within her, a sorrowful spirit within her, but in the midst of sorrow and grief, in the midst of pain and trial, she says, God, I'm confident in you. In the midst of terrible circumstances, God, my faith is in you. God, the world around me, it seems like it's falling apart, and I have a pain within me because of this barrenness that I'm experiencing. But God, I still trust you in the midst of the pain, the grief, the sorrow. God, my faith is in you. In fact, her faith is so profoundly in God that she recognizes the only relief she will ever know will be in God. The only satisfaction she can ever grasp will be the satisfaction God imparts. The only happiness and joy that will ever be lasting is that which God would bring her. And really, my friends, we should take time to point out, when we talk about faith today, faith that brings joy and satisfaction, faith that brings what you really need in life, that is a faith that begins with Jesus Christ. When I come to this place of understanding that in my sinful condition, I'm separated from God, and I will know no true joy, no lasting satisfaction. I have no hope of peace, but Jesus died on the cross to bear my sins. God loved me so much that he sent his only begotten Son to be the propitiation for my sins, the one who would remove wrath from me, so that if I bow before him with a repentant heart saying, Jesus, I admit I'm a sinner, but I believe you died for me, and I believe you rose again, and would you come into my life now, Jesus, and would you forgive me and save me and make me a child of God? That's where faith begins. That's where this kind of faith starts. So be it known clearly right now, if you want a faith that's going to be described in this text, a faith like Hannah has, it begins with a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Apart from that, this doesn't apply. So here we see a mother of faith. Her faith is strong. It's not tempered necessarily by her circumstances to be diminished, but emboldened by her circumstances so that her confidence really is in God. She goes to God with such confident faith that, did you note the change in her demeanor? Verses 15 and 16, she's grieved. She's sorrowful in spirit. But verse 18, the text says, so the woman went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. She went to God with a tremendous burden, with such confidence and faith in God that when she got up from her prayer, the Bible says she was no longer sad. She was no longer burdened. She had handed it all to the Lord and trusted Him to care for it. This is a woman of immense faith. Her faith allowed her to give her burden to the Lord and leave it with Him. She did not continue to carry it. I think she had such an abundant faith, such confidence in God. She went away refreshed. She went away relieved. She went away without sorrow, fully confident God's going to do something. I don't think she knew exactly what or how, but she just said, hey, I've asked God to take care of it. I trust God to take care of it. I'm confident God's going to take care of it. She had a strong faith. Now I want you to note, God hadn't taken action yet. At this point where Hannah's pouring out her heart at the tabernacle and Eli thinks she's drunk and she says, no, I'm not. I'm just so grieved and I'm praying. God hasn't taken any action to validify her faith. God hasn't taken any action to confirm her confidence. She's just confident in God that He will take action. In fact, she remained resilient in this prayer of faith, even though it wasn't immediately answered. Have you ever noticed when you look at this text how it describes God responding to her faith? In verse 20, we didn't read this, but if you look at verse 20, it says, so it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son. Now, did you catch that? It came to pass in the process of time. Hannah had a need, a burden, a hurt. She took it to the Lord. She found relief, confident that God would do something, but it wasn't immediate. It was in the process of time that God began to move to bring about her need, her fulfillment, her satisfaction, her peace. It was in the process of time that God responded. It wasn't an immediate response, yet she stays firm in her convictions of faith. God moves according to His timetable in her life, and the whole time she remains confident in God. The strength of her faith then was born out of the sorrowfulness, the grief, and the waiting. This was a lady who had endured much grief in life, but had a confidence in God, and her faith was made stronger because of the grief she experienced. God was at work even in the midst of the grief, and she didn't realize it because her strength was proven. It was tempered and made genuine. This morning I want you to know, be it our ladies or just any of us who are born-again believers, that's how faith really is proven. That's how faith really is tempered. And this morning as we consider this lady's faith, I want you to know it is the tried faith. That tried faith that has been proven, that is the blessing of a mother's faith. What is the blessing of a mother's faith in our life? It's the blessing of we have mothers whose faith has been tried and tested and tempered and proven. It's a genuine faith, and it impacts us because their faith is real. And it's been proven real by the testing of circumstances of life, the difficulties of life. Like Hannah, so many of the mothers we know, they bless us from a faith that has been proven by the fire. It's been tested and forged and strengthened. In fact, whether you're a mother or not, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter if you're a child of God. This is the reality. Many of the circumstances of life strengthen and temper our faith. Prove it genuine. That's what Peter had to say about it. The confidence that one has in God in facing sorrow and grief, that confidence is what grows strong faith. You're familiar with James 1. I know our ladies have been studying that or have studied it. The apostle says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." How did Hannah come to have such a strong faith? Because she endured various trials, confident in God, and saw God work time and again. Her confidence was in God, and her faith was perfected, so she lacked nothing. She was complete in the Lord in her faith. It's often the trials of a mother's faith that build faith, that's a strong faith, the kind of faith that blesses us. Trials require, dare I say, even drive us to depend on God, and in that, our faith is grown and strengthened, refined. This is the spiritual maturation process we talk about, where faith grows and becomes greater. The genuineness of faith is witnessed as the grace and the joy of the Lord resounds in our lives, even in the midst of trials. When you think back so many times about the faith of a mother that becomes a blessing, you boil it down to, I could see God's grace and joy upon her life, even though we were in such difficulty, and things were hard, and times were bad. And yet, God's moving upon my mother's life, bringing her joy through His grace and her faith, I could witness it. It was a blessing to me. That describes Hannah. I hope it describes all of us, that we have such a faith that has grown so strong that regardless of the world around us, the grace of God, the joy our faith brings in God, from God, impacts those around us. Our faith is proven genuine in that. See, I really think that's how mothers really become such a great blessing, because their faith is put on display through times of difficulty. And in times of difficulty, we see mother's strong faith, we see God's grace, and it gives us hope that we can have the same type faith, the same type blessing, the same type grace, the same type joy. This is the faith that we look to, we learn from, that encourages us. I wonder if it's the kind of faith you have today. Do you have the church pew faith? Hey, I was there on Sunday. Or do you have the faith that regardless of the circumstances you face, you still experience the grace and joy of God that guards your hearts and minds with a peace that surpasses understanding, and people can observe God's grace in your life because you're strong faith in Him? Mother, father, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, friend at school, I mean, do people see that kind of faith in you? I wonder. You see, Hannah gives an example of a true, genuine, strong faith. And from that strong faith, we glean something else about her. And that is, in this mother, we see a mother's knowledge. A mother's knowledge. Hannah not only had a great faith, she had a great knowledge of God. And quite often, genuine faith is accompanied by a true knowledge of God. Usually where there's a strong faith, we find deep spiritual understanding. Someone who has grown in faith has also grown in what the Bible calls the deep things of God. They usually go hand in hand. And you see that with Hannah. Now you have to read chapter 2. I'm not going to read the full text. But in chapter 2, Hannah's praying again. This time she's not praying silently like before. This time she's praying a out loud prayer of worship and praise. And when you look at that prayer, you come to see all that she understood about God. She had an intimate knowledge of God. For example, chapter 2 begins as she states that strength comes from the Lord. She had experienced this. She had grown in this. She knew God as the source of strength. She continues and she speaks of the unmatched holiness of God. She understood this theological concept of holiness, complete righteousness, complete perfection, and declares it's only in God. She continues in chapter 2 and acknowledges God's omniscience and just action in the world. Here's a lady who has grasped the omniscience of God. That's not an entry level, give me the milk kind of stuff. That's a little bit deeper in your knowledge of God. This lady's great faith had drawn her to deeper understanding of the Lord. She continues in chapter 2 to declare God is the judge of all, who will bring righteous consequences upon all. And then she makes a statement there in chapter 2 as she's issuing this prayer that really is a profound statement. In chapter 2, verse 10, she mentions God's king, God's anointed one. Now, put this in perspective. Israel has no king. They've yet to petition God for a king. Israel has judges who've been raised up by God to overthrow an oppressive hand, to establish peace. They fade out. God will raise up a different judge at a different time. There are various leaders here or there, but no king or anything like that. Yet Hannah mentions God's king, his anointed. Now, I know some of you theologians are going to take your own interpretation. That's okay. Some of you are going to say, no, she's talking about the judges. Some of you are going to say, no, she's referencing Deuteronomy 17, where the law mentions a king. Some of you may say, well, no, Hannah's speaking of the Davidic dynasty that's first referenced in Genesis 49 there. But I beg to differ. I don't think she's mentioning anything about David. He's not even around yet. I don't think she's talking about the king of Israel. There's no such person or office yet. I think the most likely interpretation is that this is a reference to the Messiah. If you look at Luke 1, 46 through 55, you'll see that Hannah's words parallel the Song of Mary after the birth, or before the birth, but when after she visits with Elizabeth there. Now, the parallel there is too close. These passages have to be related. In the reality, I think it's simply this. This is an allusion to the Messiah, God's anointed, the King, the eternal King. Now, how in the world did Hannah have this knowledge? I don't know. Did she have a full knowledge that this is going to be the Messiah? Here's what he's going to do? No, I don't believe that at all. I think she had a glimpse of some eschatological insight given by God, some glimpse of this anointed one, but I don't think she knew the ins and outs of it. I don't think she knew the details. My point is simply this. The point I'm trying to make is this. She had a great faith that led to a deep understanding of God. This was a mother who had a deep faith and a deep understanding of God. A strong faith with a strong knowledge of spiritual things. That's simply the point. When we consider our mothers that are truly blessings, what we find is this. The spiritual wisdom of intimate knowledge of God is the blessing of a mother's knowledge. My mother's knowledge, what makes it a blessing? Because she has an intimate knowledge of God that brings her spiritual wisdom that infects. It spreads. It influences. It helped us along the way. How many have been blessed by mothers who have such a profound knowledge of Scripture and the truths of God, and they imparted that and taught that to their children, shared it with their families, got engaged in the church to teach classes or help with children, and so on and so on and so on. Proverbs 1:8 says, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching." Spiritual wisdom. Solomon there in Proverbs declares the importance, the value of what we learn from our mothers. And the value of what we learn from our mothers is not necessarily how to tie our shoe or how to be potty trained, but the spiritual truths of God. That's the valuable stuff. Where a lady of deep faith has a deep understanding of God and imparts it to others. And really that applies to any of us who are children of God. Now, there's an assumption made by Solomon. When he says that we should hear our father's instruction and we shouldn't forsake our mother's teaching, he's assuming our fathers and mothers have something to teach and instruct. There's an assumption made there that those of us who are parents actually have something to impart. And I don't think Solomon really meant, I want you to impart everything your child needs to make the all-conference team, the all-star team, or first chair in jazz band. I don't think Solomon was saying, I want you to impart all the knowledge your kids need to catch a trophy fish or kill the biggest buck. I think the instruction that he's really talking of were the spiritual truths of God that profoundly affect us and have eternal consequences. Forsake not your mother's teaching. 2 Timothy 3:15 tells us the sacred scriptures make us wise. That's the wisdom. That's the teaching. That's the instruction. The knowledge that blesses is spiritual knowledge, spiritual wisdom. That's what Hannah possessed. And I know some of you are like, well, now, men are the spiritual leaders of the home. Well, yeah, you're right, but Solomon said, father and mother teach. Mama's got a lot to teach. Sometimes daddy needs to get out of the way, if you know what I mean. I think there are many of you that if you had the opportunity to give a testimony would tell me, my mama taught me so much about the Bible and about the Lord, about faith in Jesus. Because a mother of deep faith who has a deep spiritual knowledge instructs us that way. That's what we need. That's what we need. We need mothers who bless children with spiritual wisdom that has eternal and lasting consequence. But the reality is, if you're here and you claim to be a born-again believer, I challenge you, do you have that kind of wisdom to impact those around you? Do you have that deep knowledge? Have you developed a strong faith that has brought you to a deep understanding that now you can impart spiritual wisdom to others? That's the description of Hannah here. But there's one last thing I want you to see about Hannah. And that's a mother's dedication. A mother's dedication. You see, she had a strong faith, a genuine faith. She had an intimate knowledge of God, and it brought her to a stupendous dedication to God. And in fact, that's what should happen. As I grow in my faith and I grow in spiritual wisdom, it should draw me to a place of real dedication to God, to the kingdom of Jesus. Hannah demonstrated this. Verse 11, she says, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. She says, God, if you'll bless me with a son, I'm going to give him to you. All the days of his life, he's yours. God, I'm so dedicated to you that my son is yours all the days of his life. This is the sacrificial giving of her son for the purpose of God, for the will of God. God, what is your purpose for my son? What is your will for my son? Because I will see it done. I'll do my part to make it happen. All the days of his life. Now, Samuel, if he entered into the priesthood, under the Mosaic law, he would have started his service there at the tabernacle age 25, age 30. He would have served for a limited amount of time. He would have been done. He would have been Hannah's up to 25 or so. He would have served. He would have come home, back to Hannah again. But she says, no, Lord, his whole life, he's yours. His whole life. The entirety of his life. In fact, you'll go back and read the text, you'll find that from the time she weaned Samuel, she kept him till then, but once he was weaned and ready, she took him to the tabernacle. She brought him to Eli, and there she dedicated him to the Lord, left him for the Lord's service, to the Lord's purpose, for the Lord's will. In that, she dedicated herself to raising her son to strict guidelines, by strict guidelines. You'll notice in verse 11, there's a reference to no razor coming upon him. That would indicate a Nazirite vow. A Nazirite vow was a very strict vow. It was a special commitment of service to the Lord. To be a Nazirite, you had to abide by very strict regulations. To be raised in a Nazirite vow meant your mother had to observe very strict regulations in how she raised you. What we see then is Hannah commits herself to raising her son according to very strict guidelines so that God would be honored by his life. She would be intentional in seeing that her son was raised for the glory of God and in obedience to his will. She dedicated herself to that. She dedicated herself to enabling her son to serve the Lord. In fact, as you continue to read through chapter 2 and all, you'll find that Hannah provided the garments that Samuel needed during his service there at the tabernacle. She would come each year, and each year she'd bring the robe. She'd keep him clothed. She'd take care of him. He was not with her, but each year she would come to him, and she did all that she needed to do to facilitate, to support his service of God's kingdom. She maintained this supportive role of her son so that he could do what God had called him to do. Her son served God for a lifetime. And the foundation for that service was her faith and her intimate knowledge of God that brought her to a place of dedication to God's kingdom that drove her son into a full dedication to God's kingdom. So this morning I tell you that dedication to God is a mother's blessing that enables her children to serve God for a lifetime. A mother's faith, her intimate knowledge of God, her full dedication to Him, often are the catalysts to help establish the foundation for children to be dedicated to the service of the Lord for their lives. In fact, mothers who have such faith and such knowledge of God, who have such dedication, I think really should mimic the prayer of Hannah she offers here. O Lord of hosts, I give my child to you all the days of his life. I will have a special commitment to raise him for your glory, and I will be dedicated to enabling him to serve you fully. God, he's yours. He's yours. And I can say that because of the faith I have in you and my knowledge of you and my dedication to you. I can say he's yours. Now, can I guarantee you that you never have a child go off in the far country? That you never have a child step away from the Lord? No, I can't guarantee that. But I can say this. If you have a strong faith that your kids see, you have an intimate knowledge of God that is deep and profound, that imparts wisdom to them, and they can observe your dedication to God, you set them on a good starting point to serve God. You set them at the right place to begin. Let me just say to you parents, from Hannah's example here, when you're blessed with children, you are given a great responsibility. Paul told the church at Ephesus, in fact, you're responsible to raise them in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. A strong faith with an intimate knowledge of God, dedicated to Him, should lead you to raise up your children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. That's spiritual instruction, that's spiritual discipline, that's shaping them to fall into line with God's purpose and will. If you're going to fulfill this mandate, you're going to give your children back to God. They're God's children to fulfill His good will, His purpose, His perfect plan, no matter where that may take them. And as we know from Corey and Ava, that's not easy. It takes great faith and practice of faith to let them go. We're giving them to God that God may create in them His workmanship to be about His good works. God's expectation is that our children be equipped to serve His kingdom. I try to teach my kids a lot. I mean, if I'm honest, when it comes to the end of basketball season, I want them to get their awards. Makes me proud. I'm doing all I can do to see all these kids hang a trophy fish on the wall. I want to see it happen. But when my time is up on this earth, if all they can say is, boy, Dad helped us in sports and Dad took us fishing, I have failed immensely. But if they can say, I stand firm in the faith, faithfully serving Jesus because Dad equipped me to serve the Lord, now I've done my job. That's what Hannah did, and that's what we're called to do. Equip our kids to faithfully serve Jesus. Will they make a lot of money? I don't know. Will they be prominent in society? I don't know. But if they can stand before Jesus and hear, well done, my good and faithful servant, then something happened right. That's what we want to see. That's God's expectation. Biblical parenting, then, is being intentional, giving special care to raise our children according to God's standards, not culture's, and see them be children of God, living according to His will, for His purpose, for His glory. How do we get them there? It starts with our strong faith, our intimate knowledge of God, and our full dedication to Him, and then we set them on the course to do it. So on this Mother's Day, I just wonder, how strong is your faith? How profoundly does your faith affect your children, your grandchildren, your siblings, those around you? How intimate and deep is your knowledge of God? Can you really impart spiritual wisdom to those around you? And where is your dedication, your commitment to the Lord? Is it to the point where you can say, God, these are your kids. Do with them as you will? Do you even have a faith in the Lord? Do you even know Him? Maybe you need to go back and start with square one. Jesus, will you come into my life and be my Savior?